Hello there. Get yourself comfortable. Pull your blanket up, rest your head, and let your body go heavy the way it does when the day is truly finished. Tonight, we are going a very long way back in time, further than your grandparents, further than their grandparents, further than anyone who has ever written anything down, all the way back to the very beginning of everything. The people who first told this story were called the ancient Greeks. They lived thousands of years ago on a warm, rocky land beside a deep blue sea. They did not have telescopes or computers. What they had was time and fire to sit beside and each other, so they made stories about how the world began. These stories are called myths. They are not true the way a fact in a science book is true, but they are true in a different way, the way a good story is always true, because they help us make sense of the world around us. And the one we are following tonight is one of the oldest ones there is. It is the story of how the first things came out of nothing, how the dark and the light found each other, how the earth made mountains and filled with sea. Just listen. Let the words carry you along, quietly, like a slow river on a warm afternoon. Let us go all the way back to the very beginning. Chapter 1. The Great Emptiness. In the very beginning, there was nothing. That is worth thinking about for a moment. When we say nothing, we mean something much bigger than an empty room or a bare cupboard. An empty room still has walls and a floor and the familiar smell of the house around it. A bare cupboard still has wood and air and a small dark space inside it. Those things are empty, but they are still something. This was a different kind of nothing altogether. There was no ground to stand on, no sky above, no air to breathe, no warmth and no cold, no sound of any kind, no light. Everything we are used to, every single thing that makes the world feel like the world, simply was not there yet. Try to picture the most complete blankness you can manage. Hold it in your mind for a moment. Now let even that blankness go quiet. What is left is a little closer to what we are talking about. The ancient Greeks called this state chaos. We use that word today to mean something noisy and muddled, like a classroom where everyone is talking at once and someone has knocked something over and a bag has gone missing. But the old Greek word meant something much stiller than that. It meant a great open gap, a wide, quiet, total emptiness, not busy at all. Not tangled or confused, just completely, perfectly, thoroughly empty. Chaos was not a place you could visit or point to on a map. It had no edges and no middle. It was simply the condition of nothing having happened yet. The held breath before a story begins. Think of it like the moment just before you fall properly asleep at night. Your body has gone heavy. Your thoughts have slowed right down. The day is finished and the night has not quite begun its dreaming yet. There is a small, still gap between one thing and the next. That is the closest feeling we have to what chaos was. Only imagine that gap being not a few seconds long, but so vast and so long that there are no words large enough to measure it. And in that gap for a very long time, nothing moved, nothing changed, nothing arrived or departed. The world was simply waiting, the way a stage waits in the dark before the curtain goes up, patient and complete and absolutely still. Chapter 2. Gaia, the first solid thing. And then, without any warning or noise, something changed. It did not happen with a bang. It was much gentler than that, more like the way a thought arrives when you are drifting off to sleep. One moment your mind is empty, and the next a thought is simply there, soft and clear, as if it had always been waiting just out of sight. The first thing to arrive was Gaia. Gaia was the earth. She was not quite the earth as you know it yet. She was not soil or grass or the smell of mud after rain. She had not yet made any mountains or rivers or beaches. She was something earlier and simpler than all of that. She was the feeling of something solid. The sense that there could be a surface, that things might rest on something real instead of drifting in the emptiness forever. You know how it feels when you press your feet down onto the floor and it pushes back up against you. That quiet, steady push. The floor does not bend or give way. It just holds you there without making any fuss about it. That feeling, that solid and dependable there-ness, was what Gaia was in the beginning. She arrived the way morning arrives. Nobody decides it should happen. Nobody sends for it. It just comes because it is the next thing after the long dark, and it has always been the next thing, and it always will be. And once she was there, she was very still. She did not speak or move or make anything yet. She was simply present the way a large, warm stone is present in a sunny field, solid and unhurried, not needing to explain itself or do anything in particular. Just there, in the way that the most reliable things are there, quietly and completely. If you could have been there and stretched out on her in those early moments, the way you might lie on a flat rock beside a river on a warm afternoon, you would have felt something steady and deep beneath you, not soft like a mattress, firmer than that and more permanent, the kind of surface that has never once let anything fall through it, not in all the long years of the world. The great emptiness was now a little less empty. Gaia was in it, solid and real and in no hurry at all. She had arrived, and that was already something remarkable. Chapter 3. Tartarus and Eros, the deep and the pull. Two other things arrived around the same time as Gaia, quietly and without any fuss. The first was Tartarus. Tartarus was the deep place, the below of all belows. He was not on the surface of things like Gaia. He was underneath, so far underneath that it is almost impossible to picture how far down he went. The ancient Greeks tried to explain it like this. Imagine picking up a very heavy bronze anvil, the kind a blacksmith uses for hammering metal, and dropping it from the surface of the earth. If you let it fall, it would fall for 9 whole days, and 9 whole nights before it reached the bottom of Tartarus. 9 days of falling straight down through the dark, getting further and further from the light above, from the feel of the ground, from everything familiar, until at last, after all that falling, it would finally hit something solid. That is how deep Tartarus was. He was not a frightening place in this story. He was simply the very bottom of everything, the anchor that held the whole world steady. Think of the world as a huge, deep bowl. Gaia is the inside of the bowl, the surface where things can rest and settle. Tartarus is the space right at the very bottom of it, far below everything, perfectly still, perfectly quiet, and never moving. Gaia and Tartarus were aware of each other right from the start, in the way that very large and very still things are aware of each other without needing to say anything, above and below, surface and depth, like the top and bottom of the same enormous thing. Each one made more sense because the other was there. And alongside them both came Eros. Eros is a little harder to explain because he was not a place at all. He was more like a force, a gentle, invisible pull that runs through everything, connecting things that belong near each other. Here is a way to think about it. When you roll 2 soft balls of clay toward each other on a table, they join together when they meet. Nobody tells them to. They just do, because that is what soft things do when they are close enough to each other. Or think about the way water always finds its way downhill, creeping along the lowest path it can find, always moving toward the lowest point it can reach. Something in the nature of water pulls it there, and it always goes. Eros was that pulling, that quiet, invisible tendency for things to reach toward each other and join, for 2 separate things to become something together that neither of them could be on its own. He was not the kind of love you might read about in other stories. There were no people yet, no hearts beating, no hands reaching out across a room. Eros was older and simpler than all of that. He was just the reason things join. The very first thread that would eventually connect the whole world together. With Eros present, connection was possible, and once connection was possible, everything else could begin. Chapter 4. Erebus and Nyx. The darkness and the night. Out of the great emptiness of chaos, 2 more things slowly came apart from the rest and found their own shapes. It happened the way cream rises to the top of milk if you leave it sitting long enough, slowly, naturally, without anyone doing anything to make it happen. Things find their own level, given enough time. The first was Erebus. Erebus was the deep darkness. Think of the darkest dark you have ever been in. A room at night with the curtains closed and the door shut and the light off. After a while, your eyes adjust and you can begin to make out shapes. The edge of the wardrobe, the rectangle of the window, the faint outline of things you know are there. Even then, there is still something. A little light sneaks in. Your eyes find it and use it. Erebus was darker than that. He was the kind of dark that exists in places where light has simply never been. deep inside a mountain, far from any opening, at the bottom of a well so deep that the circle of sky at the top is no bigger than a coin. That total, complete dark, where your eyes would never adjust because there is truly nothing there for them to find. He was not scary. He was just very, very dark. The oldest dark there is, the dark that was there before anyone had ever lit a fire or struck a spark or opened a door and let the daylight in. The second was Nyx. Nyx was the night. Darkness and night are not the same thing, even though they seem similar. Darkness is what happens when light goes away, but night is something that arrives. It comes every evening, moving in from the east as the sun drops in the west, spreading a deep blue across the sky, one star appearing, then another, then 100, then too many to count. Nyx was that arriving. She was the feeling of the world shifting gear as evening came on, the air getting a little cooler, the birds going quiet, the colours fading from the trees and fields until everything was soft shapes and shadows. The way your own breathing slows down when the day is over and there is nothing left to do. The ancient Greeks thought very highly of Nyx. They said that even the most powerful gods were careful around her. There was something about her that felt older than almost everything else, older than most of the gods who would come later. She had been there almost from the start, and she would be there long after a great deal had changed. You cannot argue with the night. It comes when it comes. It has always come. It will always come. Right now, tonight, Nyx is here. Outside your window, she has done exactly what she always does. Spread her dark across the sky, hung her stars, let the world go quiet. She has been doing this since before any of us can remember. Erebus and Nyx settled in together, the deep dark and the wide night, easy in each other's company, the way things that have always belonged together are easy. The world around them was very dark and very still, but it was getting fuller with each thing that arrived, and the next thing to come would be something quite new. Something that had never existed before in all the long quiet of the emptiness. Something bright. Chapter 5. Ether and Hemera, the first light. The world was dark, gently and completely dark, lit by nothing, filled with the soft presence of Erebus and Nyx and nothing else. And then, from Erebus and Nyx themselves, something new arrived. The first was ether. Ether was the upper air, not the air you breathe every day, the ordinary air that fills your lungs and that you never really think about. That kind of air is fine and useful, but it is not what ether was. Ether was the clear, bright air that lives high above the clouds. If you have ever been on a hill on a very clear, sunny day, you might have noticed something about the light up there. It feels different from the light down in a town or a valley. It is cleaner somehow, sharper. Like everything up there is more itself, more vivid and more real than it is lower down. That quality, that high, clean, luminous openness, was ether. He rose upward as soon as he arrived, the way bright things always tend to, always seeking the highest place they can find. And as he rose, the world changed for the very first time since Gaia had settled into her stillness. Because now, for the first time, There was the possibility of light. The dark was still there, spread wide across everything, but now it had something beside it, a companion, something different from itself. Nyx watched ether rise and was not troubled by it. She was wise in the way that very old things are wise, knowing things without needing them explained. She understood, without anyone telling her, that night is only restful because there is a day to rest from, that her darkness was only soft and comfortable because somewhere there was a brightness to return to. She went on doing what she had always done, tending her stars, spreading her quiet. But now she knew that when she stepped back each morning, something would be there to take her place. And that something was Hemera. Hemera was the day. She was not the sun. The sun would come much later, carried across the sky each morning by a god called Apollo, and that is a story for another night entirely. But Hemera was the quality of daytime itself, the brightness, the warmth of the air when the light is fully out, the wide open feeling of a world that is lit and visible and awake. Hemera and Nyx worked out their arrangement quickly and simply, the way things that were made for each other always do. Each morning, Hemera would step forward and the darkness would soften and draw gently back, and the light would grow from a pale glow at the very edge of the world into the full warm brightness of a new day. And each evening, Hemera would step back and Nyx would come forward, quiet and certain as always. They did not need to discuss it. They understood each other completely. As one came in, the other went out. A small acknowledgement as they passed, and then each one doing what she had always done. So the world had its first rhythm, day and night, light and dark. The slow, steady heartbeat that everything else would eventually arrange itself around. You can feel that rhythm right now, in fact. The day stepped back a while ago and Nyx came in as she always does, and the world outside went quiet and dark and still. This same turning has been going since before there were mountains or seas or any living thing in the world at all. And the morning will come. It always does. Chapter 6. Gaia shapes herself. Time kept moving. Day followed, night followed day. Hemera and Nyx keeping their quiet rhythm, the world ticking along in its new and steady way. And Gaia, who had been there since almost the very beginning, patient and wide and still, began to feel something different stirring inside her, a kind of readiness, like the feeling you get when you have been sitting in one place for a long time, and your whole body is quietly asking to move. She was the earth, but she had only ever been flat and featureless, a simple, wide surface in the middle of the emptiness. She was ready to be something more interesting than that. And so, very slowly, she began. First came the mountains. They did not shoot upward suddenly. There was nothing sudden about it at all. It was much slower and calmer than that, more like the way bread swells in a warm oven, pressing up from the flat dough into something rounded and solid and full. The ground began to swell in places, lifting steadily, finding shapes that felt right, growing into long ridges and curved slopes, and at last into proper peaks. Some rose gently, becoming soft hills with rounded tops. The kind of hills you can walk up without too much effort, where the view from the top stretches out a long way in all directions. Others pushed much higher, becoming true mountains, with steep sides and sharp peaks that reached up toward Ether himself, into that clear, bright upper air, as if the earth was stretching upward, trying to touch the sky. Gaia felt the mountains the way you feel your own fingers when you spread your hand wide open. They were part of her. They were her reaching up, her way of being in the world in a more interesting and varied way than a flat plain could ever be. The mountains stood in the quiet world and were simply magnificent. There was no one yet to look at them and feel how magnificent they were. But they were magnificent all the same. Grandness does not need an audience. Nyx passed over them that night and noticed how differently the dark fell across them. The shadows gathered deep and soft in the valleys between the peaks, pooling there in a way they could never pool on flat ground. Long, cool shadows stretched slowly down the slopes as Nyx moved across the sky overhead. She liked the mountains very much. She found herself moving a little more slowly above them than she did above the plains, taking her time. And then, after the mountains had found their shapes and settled into them, came the sea. The sea arrived in a completely different way from the mountains. Where the mountains had pushed upward, the sea poured in. It flowed into all the low places between the mountain ranges and the wide flat plains, filling every hollow steadily and quietly. The way water fills a bath when you turn the tap on and then walk away and come back to find it full, finding every dip, covering every low place, always seeking the very lowest point it could reach. The Greeks called this first sea Pontus. He was wide and grey-green and always, always moving. Even on the very calmest day, the surface of the sea is never completely still. It breathes, it lifts gently and falls again, like the chest of something very large that is resting but not quite asleep. Pontus settled into his shape. His edges met the feet of the mountains. His middle was deep and dark and cold and very still far below. But his surface was alive, always moving, catching the light when Hemera came each morning and breaking it into thousands of small, bright pieces that shifted and sparkled and were never the same twice. And then Nyx came one evening and noticed something she had never seen before. When she spread her dark across the sky and her stars came out one by one, she looked down and saw them again, reflected in the surface of the sea below. The same stars, but trembling, shifting and swaying gently with each breath of the water, broken apart and put back together over and over as the sea moved beneath them. She had never seen her stars from below before. She had never seen them reflected in anything. She stayed a little longer than usual that night, watching them tremble in the water, thinking about how the same thing can look quite different depending on where you are standing when you look at it. Gaia felt the sea settle into her low places and was glad in the deep, quiet way that very large things are glad. The mountains needed the sea beside them. The sea needed the land around it. Each one helped the other make sense. The world had its first real shape now. Mountains standing in the early light, a wide sea breathing slowly in the spaces between them, the deep anchor of Tartarus far below, the clear bright air of ether high above, and Nyx and Hemera turning in their steady rhythm, keeping time for a world that was only just beginning to be worth keeping time for. A quiet reflection. Let us rest here for a moment before we say good night. We started with nothing, with chaos, the great wide emptiness before anything existed. And from that emptiness, step by step, the world found its pieces. Earth and deep below, dark and night, then light. Then the rhythm of day and night, turning steady as a heartbeat. Then mountains, then the sea. Nothing in it was wasted. Every piece that arrived had its place. The darkness made the light mean something. The deep below made the surface feel solid, and the sea made the mountains look like mountains. Things need each other. That is what this old story quietly says. Good night. And so our story for tonight is done. The world is in its place, Gaia wide and still, her mountains standing, her sea breathing slowly in and out, Tartarus deep below, ether clear and high, and Nyx here, as she always is, doing what she has always done. In the next story, Gaia will bring forth the sky itself, a great being called Uranus. And from earth and sky together, the first great family of powerful beings will be born. But that is for another night. Tonight, you have been all the way back to the very beginning, the first solid thing out of the emptiness, the first dark, the first light, the first mountains, the first sea, the oldest journey there is. The same Nyx is outside your window right now. The same earth is beneath your house. The same rhythm that Hemera and Nyx began together brought this evening to you and will bring tomorrow morning. You are not just listening to this story. You are inside it. Rest now. The mountains are standing. The sea is breathing at its edges, slow and easy. Nyx is here with her dark and her stars. And you are here, warm and still, held up by the same ground that has been holding everything since the very beginning. Good night.